Mindset Forge, Episode 3. Mindset, Requirements, Tools and Practices. Better than to conquer 1,000 times 1,000 men is to conquer oneself. The Buddha. I teach you the Superman. Man is something that should be overcome. What have you done to overcome him? Friedrich Nietzsche. Welcome back to the Mindset Forge, the best ideas of humanity for you to reforge yourself. I am your host. Call me Laurent Louhel. Let's get hammering. I am very excited for this episode, the third installment in our podcast about mindsets. I would not have started hosting a podcast just to talk about a theory and abstract ideas I've read from books or scientific findings that have no bearing on people's lives. No, what drove me to start this podcast was my knowledge and continued interest in the practical applications into the development of healthy, strong, yet flexible mindsets. From my studies and investigations, I've learned that there's a wealth of information available, ranging from mythological to philosophical to scientific, all of which can be of great benefit when it comes to building character and improving oneself. Yet it is locked away in books that can be very difficult to approach without the proper background and understanding, or simply a lack of time. My goal is to distill the information I've gathered and draw connections between repeated themes, synthesizing useful ideas that keep reappearing across time and culture, from religious lessons held in ancient India to the philosophy in the European continent spanning a couple of thousand years, all the way to modern neuroscience and psychology. Because you don't have to figure all of this stuff out on your own. Countless thinkers have brooded over the same things you have and written down their thoughts, from the meaning of life to what is right and proper and how to best go through life. And now it is my objective to relate the very best of all that insight to you in plain English, or at least as well as I'm capable of pronouncing. All these things influence your beliefs and aspirations, in other words, your mindset. So, Mindset Forge really is a course in the very best ideas of humanity concerning our views, opinions, attitudes and beliefs, with the focus on developing a mindset, personality and capability that works in practice, providing energy, certainty and peace of mind. A philosophy of life, a guiding principle, a warrior's code, a scientifically studied mindset. It's all the same to me. Most of these so-called best ideas are practices and techniques one can apply in their daily life. After all, an idea without any use could hardly rank very high in value. This episode is dedicated to these practical ideas. We are going to be talking about mindfulness, about relatively obscure philosophical concepts, as well as neurobiological findings. But don't worry, you don't need to have any prior knowledge of any of these areas to gain great benefit, as long as you stay open to new ideas. In fact, it is better you forget all your prior notions you might have of the various things discussed, since there are many misconceptions about them that will just hamper you on your journey if you keep carrying them around in your mind. Because that is how I define a bad mindset. It holds beliefs that limit you from realizing your full potential, be it in mood, energy or achievement, either directly by putting it in your mind that such an end is impossible. For example, like in a fixed mindset, a person thinks they cannot change. or hold you back indirectly by making you lack the energy or focus required to work on your goals. I will be reviewing different concepts, giving you building materials for a better mental framework to replace the maladaptive ideations you unwittingly hold on different subjects, and explain procedures you can use to train your mind and character. If this sounds abstract, don't worry, it won't be. It is something I have done myself, on myself, and I assure you the reality of the change is very concrete. That is another reason for me to create this podcast. Something I never planned on doing until a few months ago. Almost daily I hear people complain about stress, about fatigue, about lack of motivation, and listening to their reasons I find them to be fundamentally mistaken about the reasons for their problems. Almost without an exception, they blame outside factors when their issues could be hammered away by doing work on their mindset. Yet when I very delicately try to instruct them on a better course, they rarely seem to listen, as the real answers are so far away from what they are used to hearing that the gap is next to impossible to bridge in such a short conversation. Hopefully, people will be more open to these ideas when they are delivered by an incorporeal voice over speakers, earbuds, or headsets. Before we talk about what you need to do to change and improve some quality of yourself, let's first talk about what you need to have for considerable change for remaking yourself to be possible in the first place. I hope you have the money for a spiritual journey into the Amazon rainforest. Just kidding, you already have what is required. It is an inherent capability of our brain called neuroplasticity. That means our brains adapt and reorganize in response to internal and external stimuli. There are several ways this takes place, and they involve functional or structural changes in the brain itself. Nerve cells called neurons connect to one another with long appendages called axons, and the space between one neuron and the other is called a synapse. There, the neurons exchange chemicals referred to as neurotransmitters to get the signals across. The other cell type are glial cells, which can be thought of as glue and support for the neurons, although they have many tasks. But how does neuroplasticity take place? This question could be approached from many directions, but I will explain the known mechanisms ranked by the fastest to the slowest. How long would you think it would take for your brain to make some structural change after trying to learn something new, just as a new skill? You might think the answer is months, since that's how long it took you to learn to walk or to speak. But a 2012 study making use of a MRI-based framework called diffusion tensor imagining showed signals reflecting microstructural changes after only 2 hours of training, which in this case meant learning to play Need for Speed. The researchers tell us these imagining findings are most likely caused by the reshaping and strengthening of neuronal and glial structures. Your brain does not have nerves that sense the brain itself, and that might be a good thing. Otherwise, you might constantly feel your brains squirming as they responded to your surroundings. The researchers of the previous study, called Learning in the Fast Lane: New Insights into Neuroplasticity, conclude how this structural change might lead to long-term potentiation. The what now? Long-term potentiation, or LTP, refers to strengthening of axonal connections based on their interplay. Simply put, And stop me if you have heard this one before. Neurons that fire together, wire together. When two neurons are activated together repeatedly, the synapse between them strengthens, and this change, potentiation, can last for months. It is mediated by the NMDA receptor, whose activation, after many neurochemical steps, leads to increased protein synthesis and empowers that connection. This mechanism is currently our best bet or answer to the puzzle of how we learn new things. Its opposite, long-term depression, leads to the weakening of pathways that are unused, and this change in our brain structure has the effect of making us forget or unlearn a skill. While it is annoying to be face to face with someone and realizing you cannot recall their name, the ability of the brain to prune unneeded connections is actually great. It allows us to unlearn unwanted and maladaptive behaviors and reactions, or at the very least, tidies up our tangled information highway. The shapes and lengths of synapses is known to increase, but it is unclear whether their amount itself can increase. In studies, a change of synapse convexity has been shown to take place in just a time frame of 2 minutes to 24 hours after activation of LTP, long-term potentiation. Here we have another example of rapid change taking place after neuronal activation. The final pathway of neuroplasticity I'm going to mention is neurogenesis, meaning the birth and growth of new neurons from progenitor stem cells. In mammals, this process seems to be confined to specific parts of the brain, namely dentate gyrus of the hippocampus, which contributes to formation of episodic memories, and the olfactory bulb, which deals with the sense of smell. This process is well documented in rats, but still a matter of debate in humans. Now, you don't need to know any of this to make use of it. You've been doing it all your life, whether you knew it or not. So why did I go into details at all? For 3 good reasons. Number 1 is that this way you better understand the consequences of your actions and thoughts. When you act, and that includes thinking, neurons are connecting in your brain, strengthening those connections so that kind of action happens more easily and naturally in the future, while the capacities that go unused get trimmed away. So, if you neglect to train some skill or characteristic in favor of procrastination or unskillful behavior, you will find yourself more and more inclined to that unfavorable path of behavior. Reason number 2 is that by understanding the underlying processes, we might be able to make full use of them and avoid things that would hamper the process. For example, pharmaceuticals that alter or block the NMDA receptor or the following protein synthesis have been shown to hinder long-term potentiation, leading to failure of memory formation. Sometime in the future we will go into the matter of how exercise, gut microbes, medications and even psychedelic drugs affect the brain's capability of changing itself. And the third reason is that the study has shown just knowing about neuroplasticity has positive effects. A 2018 meta-analysis whose first author is Jeremy Sarrazin, showed that teaching people about neuroplasticity induced growth mindset, which in turn is correlated with improved motivation, achievement and brain activity. So, me telling you about neuroplasticity is already helping you on your path. No need to thank me. But seriously, keep this in mind as you go through your life, especially when you have to make a choice or find it difficult to motivate yourself into a change you know to be beneficial or otherwise needed. The reason why new situations seem difficult is that those neuronal connections are quite weak at the beginning, but as soon as you begin, they will start growing more powerful. If you give up, your giving up neuronal connections will strengthen, and in no time at all you will be a person who gives up and finds it difficult to get things done. You don't want that, now do you? Just to be clear, the tangible outcome of neuroplasticity, of laying out all these wires in the brain, is learning, becoming better at tasks that life throws at you or ones that you have undertaken yourself. Another quality that you will need is already familiar to you, as it has been mentioned multiple times already: growth mindset. This is self-explanatory, since the very term means you hold the belief that you can change and improve through work and learning. If you still hold the belief that you cannot change who you are, then I don't know what to tell you. Just think of it this way. Are you now the same person as when you were a newborn? You can walk and talk, most likely, or if you don't, you still possess many skills and pieces of knowledge you didn't back then, and your personality is likely to be different as well. And the same will hold true when you are old. You will be different compared to your current self. We are constantly changing, whether we realize it or not. One of the prime goals of the Mindset Forge is to make you conscious of that change and allow you to take charge of it. Otherwise, your change will be dictated by outside forces and unrecognized instincts of your own, which will be like drifting in the ocean in a boat without oars. You will have no say whether you will end in the Bahamas or the coasts of Antarctica. If you still feel uncertain about growth mindset, don't worry, it is also quite common to believe you can change some part of yourself, but not others. In time, even this belief is likely to change as you learn and see new examples of brain plasticity in action and the idea matures in your mind. Just remember that changes are taking place in your brain and you can direct them with your conscious action, and you have started on the right path. Not every happening creates an equal impression in the brain. From evolutionary point of view, the major function of our brain is to keep us alive. Learning and memory is just one tool in the service of that purpose. Therefore, the brain prioritizes information that has historically advanced our ancestors' chances of survival. From this follows that situation charged with emotion is better remembered. Most of all, fear. A scary situation might stay with you for a lifetime. In the worst case scenario leading to post-traumatic stress disorder. Even that can be ameliorated by changing your neural networks, but more on that later. Novelty and rewarded experiences also make a stronger imprint into the clay between our ears. Memory formation in this way, through emotional moments, can happen from the outside. Someone mugs you on the street and you are likely to remember that event every time you walk that street. When a memory is born out of emotional situation, it is referred to as significance-driven memory formation. It can happen at random, and sometimes you wish you could just forget. In contrast, there is also attention-driven memory formation, and this is something in your control. In this case, you pay attention to something, repeating it as often as you need to form a memory. You learn a foreign language, etc. in this way. Both require attention after all. If you are completely unaware of something, there can be no conscious memory of it. But in significance-driven memory formation, it is just a secondary mechanism, while emotion comes first. There is also expectation-driven memory formation, where you use your earlier knowledge about things relating to a novel subject, and when you encounter that novel subject a memory is formed. We will return to this information later in our discussion. Now that we have gone over the prerequisites, it is time to detail the practices you can use to begin the reforging of you. The recommendation and views I present will have a backing of latest published science as well as thousands of years of experimental data from whole cultures of people who have practiced these principles in their daily lives for their great benefit. Because there have been happy, courageous, wise, industrious, confident, cheerful, strong and, in a word, awesome people before the MRI scan was invented. What I mean by that is that the means of building a well-adapted and healthy mindset have been known for a long time, more than a millennia, but the methods of studying the effect have only been invented a relatively short time ago. Let's approach the subject practically through an example. There is something in your life you find unsatisfactory and wish to change. Let's say it's procrastination. You wish to get more things done instead of finding excuses not to start and lose time on social media instead. What is the signal that informs you of this wish to change? Dissatisfaction, unhappiness, disappointment, all negative feelings, yet very useful in this case as they alert you to your situation. In fact, they will work to give you extra motivation, in addition of wanting the pleasure of being more productive or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. You want to get rid of the pain of disappointment. But here is the crucial first step. You have to become aware of your unhappiness and then link it to its cause. And that takes being aware of your mental and emotional state. It takes introspection. It takes mindfulness. It is a term you've probably heard before, but mindfulness simply means that you are aware of your body, your mind, and the sensations relating to them. For example, the way you are standing, how your breath feels in your nostrils, whether you are happy, sad or neutral, alert or drowsy, thinking about the issue at hand or your next meal. In other words, it means to know where your attention is and being able to direct it to whatever you wish. It also comes with the extra dimension of forgetting all your preconceived notions about the thing you are concentrating on. But the first step is getting out of mindlessness, which is the state most people exist without training the capability of mindfulness. A mindless person wanders through life like a sleepwalker, their mind constantly somewhere else. When a mindful person eats, he tastes the food, feels its texture in his mouth, its aroma in his nose. When a mindless person eats, their attention is somewhere else, so they don't really taste the food or smell the food. It is as if tasteless to them. When a mindful person speaks with another person, they concentrate on the discussion and choose what they say and how they act, so they won't say anything dumb, hasty or crude. A mindless person just reacts, says what comes up and suffers the consequences, like embarrassment. We all have the capacity of mindfulness, just like we have the capacity of becoming great in a sport, playing an instrument, speaking a language or any other skill. But like those examples, mindfulness also takes training, and most are sorely lacking in this training. Without mindfulness, you are barely aware, barely awake. That is why I posit it as the first skill one must hone if they wish to improve themselves. Without an ounce of mindfulness, one could not point out what is wrong exactly, but they would still feel bad, and making the connection to the cause of their feelings would be impossible. But that negative feeling would still be there, causing them grief. They would not know whence it came from. Like having a nightmare where you are suddenly find yourself chased by a murderer. You don't know how you got there or why the guy in the hockey mask is chasing you with a knife. All you know, you are scared and need to run. And then you run into your old classroom, naked and late for an important exam. It is all pain and stress without any logical reason, as long as you are in that bad dream, as long as you are mindless. Mindless people are everywhere, constantly stressed. They blame others, their jobs, their circumstances. They feel the pain but can't identify its source. Mindfulness is an ancient Buddhist practice, but its effect is well documented in modern neuroscience and psychiatric interventions. Becoming more skillful in mindfulness feels like waking up from a dream. Everything is so much clearer and more real and immediate, more present. In fact, the word Buddha means the awakened one, and he is called precisely that because he stopped sleepwalking through life and taught others to do the same, to really live, to touch life and reality. It is a skill that opens the door to many life-changing practices and applications that can benefit you and everyone else that puts in the work to become more advanced in them. But mindfulness itself is beneficial. If you are not mindful, your mind, by definition, wanders. Mind wandering is not usually considered to be too big of a deal, but it has been shown to have major negative effects. It makes us susceptible to making errors, worsens our performance in reading comprehension and memory tasks. Our mind often wanders to negative thoughts, past, present and future. Constant thinking about such worries is called rumination and pathological worry, and they are common in mood and anxiety disorders. And according to research, the average mind wanders 30 to 50% of the time. Just think of all that time you are not really experiencing your life, but stuck inside your own head. You would likely not be willing to trade in half your lifespan for nothing. Yet here we are, doing exactly that, as long as we neglect to become mindful. Mindfulness is often talked of or marketed as a tool for relaxation. It is that as well, which is nothing to scoff at, but that alone would not warrant it my first place in the set of tools for forging a better mindset. And I should mention that mindfulness-based interventions are evidence-based medicine when it comes to treating depression and anxiety, superior to your so-called average relaxation training. Constant anxiety and low mood are not part of a healthy, desirable mindset, and for that reason alone it is a non-negotiable practice for anyone looking to improve their mindset, and that is to say, themselves. I'll say that again, if you want to improve yourself, begin a mindfulness practice. It's not hard. Here's an example. Alright, private, pay attention to the bottom of your feet. Are they against the ground? Hot or cold? Sweaty? Have you shoes or socks on? Notice every sensation. Now concentrate on your knees. Are they bent or straight, or are they moving? Now the pelvic area. Are you sitting or standing? How does your underwear feel? Assuming you are wearing underwear. Quickly now sense your stomach, your chest, your shoulders, fingers of your right hand, fingers on your left hand. Now your neck. Inhale. Feel the air in your nostrils. Exhale. Feel the breeze. You now notice that you have a tongue. It is in your mouth. Is it resting against the bottom or roof of your mouth? Is it dry or wet? Any taste lingering on it? This concludes our mindfulness practice, private. At ease. What we just did was a body scan, a basic mindfulness meditation. Just a few minutes a day has been shown to be more beneficial than no meditation at all, but you should aim for at least 13 minutes a day. If that feels like a lot, just think about how much time you waste in a mindless state or by getting nothing done. Using minutes a day to train your capacity of mindfulness, you will effectively add years to your life, since the mindless life is as if dead already. I recommend you search online for more guided mindfulness meditations, ones longer than the introduction we just rushed through. Once you have an idea what is involved in the practices, you can practice on your own without tapes or videos. There are plenty where the guide does not live action role play as an army drill sergeant, like I just did. Being fully aware and present in your life is great. It is like getting out of a cocoon you have spent your entire life in, or finally getting glasses and realizing how sharp everything can be. But the utility of mindfulness does not end there. It opens the way to another form of meditation, which in Pali, the language of ancient India, is Vipassana and is usually translated as insight meditation or looking deeply. What does that mean? With mindfulness, you become aware of your different sensations and regard them with an attitude of curious benevolence. Even if it is pain, you do not try to get rid of it or rank it as evil. Instead, you pay attention to it without judgment. This alone helps to alleviate much of our suffering, as it creates mental distance between us and the sensations and removes pain we cause others with our worries about pain. A mindless person in pain might cry out, "Why me?" or "Will this ever end?" and torment himself further, while the mindful person acts calmly and is unperturbed. With insight meditation, you can, if you wish, take a more active approach. In this context, looking deeply means that you analyze the sensation and its sources and can then deduce how to affect it. Let's say the sensation was pain in the neck. With insight, you might understand that it is caused by you sitting hunched over all day and make the decision to choose to improve your posture and do more exercise. This simple example does not do the practice the justice it deserves, which will become apparent as we progress. Armed with proper knowledge and right view, I'm going to detail later, insight practice is the diagnostic tool, your mental MRI, that you can use to figure out what is causing your problems, and once you have the diagnosis, the problem becomes treatable. I am speaking in parable here. When I say treatment and diagnosis, I'm referring primarily to the things in your life and personality you wish to change, not to diseases and states found in the ICD-10 Codex, although they are not completely ruled out either. Changing our mindset, ourselves, is first and foremost a learning process. We reforge ourselves by learning new information and new practices. As we learned in the beginning of this episode, that happens through the process of the brain strengthening its connections. These new connections change how we feel and function, how we think and how well we perform in a given situation. But what can we do to improve our learning and thereby change ourselves faster and more completely? Earlier we mentioned what kind of situations leave the most lasting impressions on the mind. Those were novel, rewarding, surprising and otherwise emotionally charged situations. The most potent catalyst for memory being, unfortunately, for evolutionary reasons, fear. Repetition and paying attention also facilitate learning. What I didn't mention earlier, to not overload you with information, were things that have been shown in objective, peer-reviewed research to hamper memory formation. These include things that can be avoided, just as chronic stress, lack of sleep, distraction as they cause lack of attention, alcohol and drugs, and finally mood problems such as depressive states. Then there are things that weaken memory formation that are unavoidable, such as aging and medical conditions and head injuries. Why do I bring this up now? It is because mindfulness has been shown to be an effective intervention in all the most common avoidable reasons of impaired memory formation or learning. It has also been shown to boost most of the positive ways of improving memory formation. By developing your skill of being mindful, you supercharge your learning and capacity for development. The better you learn, the more effective your self-transformation, the forging of your new mindset will be. Let's go through these effects of mindfulness that relate to learning, one by one, because I want to really drive in the point. Point number 1. Chronic stress. Mindfulness-based meditation practices have repeatedly been shown to have great efficacy in reducing stress, both in healthy people as well as people suffering from cancer. We will go into a lot more detail about stress in a future episode, as it is thought to be a massive problem in our day and age. Chronic stress is said to cause a lot of misery, suffering, burnout, and even clinical disease. But I'll say it right here. Armed with the right knowledge, stress is the easiest thing in the world to get rid of. With the right mindset, it just disappears and you no longer have to suffer it. Everyone should know about this, so listen to the later episode of Mindset Forge about stress. Like other experiences produced by the brain, stress is mediated by transmitting chemicals, in this case mostly cortisol. Mindfulness has been shown to reduce the amount of cortisol in blood, lending even more credibility to its effects countering stress. Furthermore, mindfulness has been proven to lower systolic blood pressure. Increased blood pressure is a common sign of stress. Blood pressure is still the #1 cause of mortality all around the world. In short, improved learning is just one way to benefit from reduced stress as achieved with mindfulness. Point number 2. Lack of sleep. I found 2 meta-analyses that show how mindfulness has been proven to improve sleep quality in many ways, as well as ameliorate insomnia. Proper sleep is crucial for memory, mood, energy, and many other qualities. I have a lot to say about sleep as well, and what kind of mindset to assume towards it, but that is beyond the scope of this episode. Let's just say you can't live your days with the sole goal of getting a good night's sleep. That is a waste of your waking hours. There is a balance to be struck, and it is not necessarily 8 hours a night every night, but more of this controversial statement on a later date. Until then, follow the general advice you have gotten from other trustworthy sources, but just know that there is more to the story, detailed in the future episode of Mindset Forge on sleep. Just remember, if you feel you are not getting enough sleep, keep waking up and can't fall asleep or are drowsy during the day, mindfulness practice just might be the thing for you. Point number 3. Distraction or lack of attention. Attention was a major component in forming memories and learning. Distraction is the opposite of attention. Just 13 minutes a day of meditation has been shown to enhance attention. It's straightforward enough. In a 2018 research paper published in Frontiers of Human Neuroscience entitled Positive Effects of Mindfulness-Based Training on Energy Maintenance and the EEG Correlates of Sustained Attention in a cohort of nurses, it was shown that a mindfulness practice improved the nurses' attention in a psychomotor vigilance task, while those who did not perform the practice got worse over time due to how much stress their workload caused them. The nurses also subjectively felt that paying attention to the task required less energy if they had performed the mindfulness practice, supporting the theory that mindfulness either increases your attention availability or makes your attention circuits more efficient. It has also been shown that the drug modafinil mimics the effects of mindfulness. In 2 broad review articles, it was shown that meditation-based practices are effective in treating the symptoms of attention deficit syndrome, or ADD, both in children and adults, in whom the effect was even more clear, with 100% of the analyzed studies showing improvement. So, whether you just struggle to concentrate because for whatever reason, maybe because that social media distractions have lowered your skill in it, or have a diagnosed attention disorder, mindfulness and meditation are certain to help. Point number 4. Alcohol and drugs. Alcohol is in effect a poison that hampers the function of the many organ systems, one of them being the brain. Drink enough and you'll lose your memory, or even your consciousness, or your life if you keep it up long enough. The same goes for many illegal drugs if taken in large enough doses. While mindfulness probably does not counter the effects of having ethanol coursing in your veins and creating toxicity all around your body, it has been shown to be an effective way of beating addiction. For example, Vipassana, that is insight intervention, reduced the consumption of alcohol, marijuana and cocaine in an incarcerated population and proved superior over traditional 12-step program in reducing heavy alcohol consumption and substance use in a 2016 meta-analysis. Craving and addictive behavior is a large concept that a fit mindset needs to address, so we are sure to return to this theme of addictive behaviors on a later date. After all, many of us have behaviors we wish to get rid of, but cannot seem to do so. This too can be solved with mindset intervention of mindfulness. Point number 5. Low mood and depressive symptoms. In a person with major depressive disorder, it has been shown that the size of their hippocampus gets smaller and the neurogenesis that is supposed to take place there reduces. You might recall hippocampus as a central piece of memory formation. As a result, the episodic and autobiographical memory of a depressed person weakens, meaning they have difficulty remembering events and might forget things about themselves. How horrible! Good thing that mindfulness-based interventions have robust data behind them to show their efficacy in treating these disorders. They have also been shown to alter the quality of memories in major depressive disorder from categorical towards specific memories, which are related to having decent mental health. The effect of meditation on mood without specifically having a clinical mood disorder is also well documented, with just 13 minutes of daily meditation having the effect. We have now listed the ways in which mindfulness and meditation combat states that make it harder to learn and change your brain via neuroplasticity. So, mindfulness protects you from negative influences, but it also adds to the beneficial factors for memory formation. A double advantage. Let's just repeat these memory formation empowering features again, because repetition is one of them and you can gain tremendous benefit from understanding this. So we have repetition and attention as a way to boost our learning, while novel, surprising and rewarding situations make a stronger imprint in our minds. Fear is also a strong catalyst for memory formation, but it usually produces memories we would rather not have. So, novelty, reward and attention. We have gone over how mindfulness improves attention, so we won't do it again. But how can mindfulness increase the novelty and how rewarding a situation is? Is that not dependent on the situation? No, that is also a function of our mindset. Remember, mindset includes our views and attitudes, and how novel and rewarding we find something is an experience, a judgment call created in our brain out of our preconceived notions. Normally, in a subject not trained in meditation, when they receive a repeated stimulus, the stimulus produces less and less of an effect in the brain, measured with EEG reading. This happens when the stimulus has no effect on the body's homeostasis, meaning balance or the basic state of the body. For example, when the stimulus is making a repeating clicking noise. However, all the way back in 1966, it was shown that in experienced Zen meditators, this habituation does not take place. In other words, the repeated stimulus remains as novel as the first time they sensed it. A mindful mindset has also been called the beginner's mind, which means one approaches everything as if it was new. Think back to being a child, how things that now seem to you drab and ordinary were interesting, since they were novel and never before seen. Exciting. And that's beginner's mind, the mental state of wonder an advanced practitioner of mindfulness finds themselves in, and this lack of habituation might be part of the reason why this is. With beginner's mind, every experience is also rewarding and surprising, since you approach them with an open mind and in such a state learn something new every time. Do you think we live in a dull, boring, rote world? You would be wrong, but your mindset prevents you from seeing that. In the making of this podcast, I've learned a lot about sight and vision and will dedicate an episode to the matter in the future. It is worth pointing out that the methodology in these studies varies. Most study a meditation practice instead of what I call a mindful mindset. What is the difference? I mentioned a study where a meditation of just 13 minutes a day produced benefits in mood, attention, and so on. Many studies search for the smallest possible amount of meditation that has an effect, trying to maximize the ratio of time used to effect gained. But that is not my goal here. A short meditation practice can very well be your first step. It was mine as well, but we should not stop there. That was not why the Buddha taught mindfulness and why it has been practiced for millennia. The goal is to train until you are mindful all the time, so you are constantly awake and attentive, constantly happy, curious, in charge of yourself and not just blindly reacting, free from stress, and reap all the other wonderful benefits of mindfulness also, whole day, every day. Learning about mindfulness and then only using it to relax for less than 15 minutes would be like finding $100 on the street and being so happy about it that you fail to notice the briefcase with $1 billion in gold doubloons inside. You are missing out on a real treasure. I have practiced mindfulness for a few years now, and every day I feel I'm only beginning to scratch the surface of the benefits, which just keep piling up. This concludes our discussion into mindfulness in the framework of learning as part of forging yourself a better adapted mindset. There is a lot more to be said about meditation and mindfulness, and I will certainly do so in a later episode dedicated solely to these practices. But the theme of this episode was and is tools and practices for forging mindsets. And mindfulness is but one. I have no idea how long this episode is going to be, and I don't care. This is important, and I think it best that all these tools are listed in a single episode, since breaking them apart would make the message harder to grasp and make them more difficult for you, the listener, an artisan of the mindset forge, to find. Besides, I'm too excited to stop. This is something I'm really passionate about. If you need a break, now might be the time to pause, have a drink and a bite to eat, maybe stretch, depending on what you have been doing. And we are back. Let us continue. In the previous episode, I listed research examples of effects that had been achieved via change in belief or mindset. Those included such things as glucose levels and experienced pain. I introduced them to you to show the various effects mindset manipulation coming from either outside or from your own decision can have, but I doubt many of us are interested in primarily changing our blood glucose responses. No, we usually wish to change some specific thing we notice subjectively. A common one would be to procrastinate less, or maybe be less anxious, or conversely more confident, more energetic, sleep better, have better focus, lead a happier, more productive life. There is something we wish to change, and to become that becomes our goal. For there to be a conscious change, there has to be a goal. A change without a goal is just drifting, moving from one place to the next with no intention of your own. Next, we are going to talk about goals and the tools of goal setting and maintenance. Here too, the modern scientific literature is wide as an ocean, which thankfully means there are meta-analysis and systematic reviews of the subject for us to glean the pertinent data as quickly as possible. Before we get to that, I would just like to mention that the Buddha posited intention, in other words a goal, as step number 2 of his Noble Eightfold Path, which is a way to liberate oneself from all worldly suffering. Guess what is on step number 7? Mindfulness. Much of the research comes from the dimension of health-related interventions, such as trying to get people to exercise more, which is probably something that applies to most. But these same techniques can be leveraged in other types of change. After all, we have repeatedly compared training your mind to training your body. For example, when I said that Mindset Forge aims to be a mind-building podcast. What exactly, scientifically speaking, is a goal? In motivation and goal-setting science, it is commonly defined as, quote, internal representations of desired states, where states are broadly construed as outcomes, events, or processes. From our point of view of mindset, the most important term here is desired. Why? Because what we desire arises directly from our mindset, the values we hold. And what systems are required for making a goal? Let's talk neuroscience for a moment, a very brief moment. Two major players in the game are basal ganglia and prefrontal cortex. The role of the basal ganglia in this context is to learn simple associations quickly. For example, in one study, monkeys learned that when they moved their eyes in a specific direction, they received a reward. The prefrontal cortex learns more slowly but is able to capture more complex rules and behaviors and make comparisons between different strategies. So one can pick the best strategy for the long term. People with a damaged prefrontal cortex tend to choose the most immediately advantageous option. These two systems work closely together. The plasticity, learning, especially in the basal ganglia called striatum, is directed by the neurotransmitter dopamine, which many of you will already have heard about. It controls long-term potentiation and depression as a reaction to reward prediction error. So when you get more of a reward from your actions, that strengthens those neural connections, while receiving less leads to depression of those synapses. So dopamine is not secreted as a response to pleasure. It is unexpected cues that make it flow, so it produces the drive to seek something out, so our wanting or motivation to plan for the future. The signals loop around basal ganglia and prefrontal cortex to go through outcomes of different actions. It has also been proposed that the two systems can imagine the outcome, just like imagining a visual scene activates the visual cortex. Amygdala and hippocampus are also involved, and these systems signal all around the brain, but it is not my intention to go into exact detail here. So what makes a good goal? In goal theory, put forward by researchers Locke and Latham in the 90s, there are several moderators that need to be considered when setting your goal. Several mindsets are also described in relation to the stages of achieving one's goals. Moderator number 1. Ability. Simple enough. If the goal is outside your ability to reach, it is not a good goal. That doesn't mean the goal shouldn't be hard. You need certain requisite knowledge and skill before you can start aiming for a more challenging goal. Here at the Mindset Forge, our primary goal is developing a more adapted mindset. If your goal is to become more productive, you still need knowledge to reach that goal. Knowledge about the reasons why you lack productivity and what kind of factors feed the capacity of productivity in you. Set a goal that you know how to reach, and with the information I will detail in this podcast, you will understand the various mindset-related subjects better, and you can then set more complex goals. This is related to the so-called deliberative mindset, where one considers how difficult their goal is and how much they really want it, if it is worth the trouble, so to speak. Moderator number 2. Task complexity. Complexity, by and large, consists of two factors: coordinating complexity, meaning how much scheduling organizing the task requires, and dynamic complexity, meaning the effort required to maintain commitment and motivation and to overcome setbacks. The research shows that when you are starting out on your way to your goal, in the context of this podcast, your journey to change your mindset, you should not set specific difficult performance goals before you have acquired the knowledge and the skill to perform the task. To again use procrastination as an example, your goal should not be "I'll never procrastinate again" on day 1. Instead, start building up habits that counter that procrastination. I see this as related to what is termed implemental mindset in the literature, which is the state of mind where one considers how to practically go about realizing their goals. Moderator number 3. Commitment. Seems like a no-brainer, but the goal needs to be important to you, to resonate with you personally, to work. To take example from the teachings of Buddhism again, one of the steps of the Noble Eightfold Path is right effort, which means you don't waste time on interventions that don't work for you. A notable Buddhist monk by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh said that if sitting meditation feels like a chore to you, you should not do it. It is not right use of your efforts. And there could hardly be a more fundamental practice for a novice meditator. Yet even that can be dismissed if it doesn't work, doesn't speak to you. Find a goal that you are committed to. Working towards a goal you are committed to awakens the action mindset, which focuses entirely on pursuing the goal, even blinding you to information and thoughts that would contradict your ambitions. Very useful mindset when you want to stay committed. Moderator number 4. Feedback. Without feedback, you don't know if you are moving towards your goal. Self-monitoring has proven effective, so it doesn't have to be more complicated than you keeping track of how you did that day and week and month, depending on how long you keep at it. To take our procrastinator friend again, for example, he should keep track how much he got done and attempt to pump up those numbers as time goes by. The mindset to complement this phase is the evaluative mindset, in which one considers how well they did and whether they've achieved their goal or not. Moderator number 5. Situational resources. If your goal is to increase the weight you can bench press, you are going to need a barbell. Simple. Changing your mindset requires much less. You don't even necessarily need basic amenities. If your goal is to build character, those kind of conditions will just aid you on your journey, provided you see them as a learning opportunity. For example, I didn't used to think anything about sleeping indoors, but going through basic army training and sleeping in the forest in winter really made me appreciate just basic indoor bedrooms and bathrooms, etc. So, set a realistic goal that you think you can achieve with your current knowledge and skill and funds and available time, etc. and you should be good to go. Setting a goal that requires too much effort and is too challenging can lead to stress, anxiety and the like, and should be avoided. If you find you set yourself too high of a goal, researchers show letting go of it is the healthy thing to do. If you find it difficult to stop pursuing a goal, even when it seems unattainable and causes you suffering, one way is to exchange it for another, better picked goal. A 2015 meta-analysis showed that the specificity of a goal did not really matter, so the very concrete goal worked as well as the vague, quote, I'm going to be more active, quote, and the middle option of, quote, I'm going to increase my activity by 20%, end quote. Weekly goals were less effective than daily or a combination of goals thereof, so when setting your goal, it would be smart to plan it in such a way that you can perform it every day. To return to our example of procrastination, the goal of I'm going to work on this project every day is a better choice than I'm going to work on this project every week. To use myself as an example, I work on this podcast, writing the script and recording the episodes and editing it every day. And I'm also writing a book, which is my second one. I self-published the first one, and I also work on my new book every day, aiming for at least 500 words a day, and recently I have bumped up those numbers to 1000 words a day, which I usually accomplish in 2 sittings of writing. You should not revisit your goals daily. That has been shown to decrease the results. You should not update your goal more often than twice a week, and even that sounds frequent. These same ideas are summarized in the Initialism SMART EST, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, evidence-based, strategic, and tailored. Let's just go through what each point means. Here, specific relates to the specificity of the goal, but as we just discussed, the latest research has shown this not to matter as much. So don't worry too much about the specifics. Measurability and attainability we discussed, but the goal needs to be realistic and you need to have a way to follow your progress, to know how you are doing, and then commit to actually following the progress. Relating to these, the effect of fantasies versus expectations has also been studied. The evidence shows that positive expectations correlate with better outcomes, but indulging in fantasies hurts both the performance as well as one's mental health. Relevant means relevant to you, making it a close cousin of commitment. A goal that is not in any way relevant to you would likely be difficult to commit to. Remember, daily goals are better than weekly and have a time-bound frame in which you aim to make progress. Evidence-based is a big theme not mentioned until now and highly important to me. There needs to be evidence of it working, preferably from many objective scientific studies and meta-analysis of those studies. Other evidence I will consider is if there is a vast amount of empirical data showing time and time again that something works, and I also find it working in my own life. For example, the meditation studies I cited earlier concentrated mostly on obvious meditation, such as sitting with your eyes closed for 15 minutes a day. Being mindful all the time has not been studied as rigorously, yet the more I do it, the more benefit I gain, and so will you, which makes perfect sense when we extrapolate from the studies of limited scope we have. This channel will never recommend homeopathy, healing crystals or the like, so-called alternative medicine, whose effect is based on placebo. What I will recommend is that you think about how to learn to use your brain and mind to create that placebo effect. Maybe you should call it belief effect, and develop your capacity so the effects are achieved directly with your own mind, not with some trinkets or concoctions meant to deceive you into feeling better. Make yourself feel better with your mind and thoughts. That is my stance on placebo and evidence-based interventions. Strategic refers to how one approaches the goal, not randomly, but with a logical strategy born out of tested theories and using what works for the specific goal and person pursuing it. A lot of what we discuss in this podcast is strategy. Even goal setting with SMART EST rule is one such strategy. The final piece of the puzzle, tailored, means you fit the ambition and your way of pursuing it into your current means, both inside, like skill, knowledge and energy of yourself, and outside, like the resources available in your vicinity. And let's not forget the perspective of the mindset theory on setting your goals. Remember growth and fixed mindsets. A growth mindset is associated with learning goals and fixed mindset with performance goals. The former aims for mastery via learning, so challenge and even failure turns to fuel, as a growth mindset person recognizes it all just improves his learning process. Setbacks don't worry him, they encourage him to try harder. For a fixed mindset person, a failure in goal attainment means they are a failure themselves, and this often causes people with a fixed mindset to avoid difficult pursuits entirely. From a growth mindset point of view, that is failure in itself. Without daring to try and improve yourself, you'll forever be a failure. So to try and making mistakes and struggling is much preferred. In other words, it is better adapted to aim to improve rather than bet your self-identity on whether you succeed on the first try or not. Earlier I mentioned how it is beneficial to have positive expectations instead of fantasies, but I have to admit I do entertain fantasies myself. More on that later, but it is likely you have high hopes as well. Indeed, it is not my wish to make anyone forget about their dreams in favor of carefully calculated objectives. I think it is better to dare to dream. So what can be done about our fantasies to make them serve our ambition? Thankfully, research once again comes to the aid in the form of the grandly named fantasy realization theory. In an article named Future Thought and Behavior Change, it is discussed at length, and a practical tool we can all use in the pursuit of our fantasized goals is introduced: the method of mental contrasting. This means that you do not stop at dreaming about your future. Instead, you mentally contrast it with the present. And this makes you think about all the things that stand in the way of realizing that future and has been shown to motivate people to work for their goals. Just to pick one example of the many the researcher provides, when people use this method in pursuit of their goal of more exercise, they did more exercise than the control group, which was not taught about mental contrasting. The mental contrasting group learned how to prepare for difficulties. For example, if they should feel too tired to go for a jog, they would put on their running shoes immediately and go for a run. All the same, a concept I see related to fantasies are intentions. After all, when we take that daydream and start seriously consider realizing it, it turns from a fancy into an intention. And as luck would have it, we have research on how to best leverage intentions as well. A paper by Peter Gollwitzer of New York University tells us that simply having goal intentions is not enough. It is beneficial to supplement them with implementation intentions. Simply put, this just means that in addition of considering your goal, you also consider the practical steps to reach that goal. If your goal intention is I'm going to study more, your implementation intention could be I'll study for 1 hour every morning. This seems related to coordinating and planning your goal striving, as we discussed earlier. In this process, we have achieved the implemental mindset mentioned before. It has also been shown that implementation intentions sort of prime your cognition, so you find things that support furthering your goal more readily and are quicker to act on them. The benefits of intentions are manifold. First, goal intentions give us certainty by setting priorities. When we have determined what goal is important for us at the time, we can commit to it and relegate other conflicting things to the background. This also improves our persistence. For example, one morning we have a wish to study but also to sleep in late. Our set intention to study and our commitment to it help us ignore our desire to laze about and get on working towards our goal. Implementation intentions, meaning determining when, where and how we intend to achieve our goals. And when those situations appear, they cue behaviors we have planned beforehand. So every time a clock strikes 8 o'clock, we get to studying. We don't have to keep reinventing the wheel every day. This works at least as well with avoidance goals, like in the previous example, where the women decided to go running instead when they felt the urge to hit the sofa. Adding some exercise into your life is fine, but a modest goal, a goal that directs your entire life, giving it structure and a purpose, is called a life aspiration. These two can be divided into groups of differing benefit. Intrinsic life aspirations are goals like competency and autonomy, while extrinsic life aspirations refer to the desire to attain wealth, fame, and so on. Intrinsic goals are related to better health and well-being, while extrinsic aspirations tend to cause sorrow, just like the learning and performance goals of growth and fixed mindset people. We have just expounded on various ways of setting goals and what kind of goals are the most beneficial, as well as implementing strategies to prepare and get over hurdles and setbacks on the way to our ambitions. But I'd like to introduce one more, cognitive reappraisal, because we will face a challenge on our way to a better us. Negative emotions. Training is hard, sleeping in is nice. I don't feel like working on that project right now, and so on. For many of us, our goal might very well be to become a person that is forge a mindset that allows us to enjoy these useful activities and partake in them without a struggle. When we want to change our emotions, we have created an emotion regulation goal, since we have a wish to enter into an emotion we are not currently in. How to use cognitive reappraisal? It simply means using the higher functions of our cortex to reassess the situation and thereby feed our brain reasons to change our behavior. For example, to overcome the lure of the bed, we might think how it will keep us from our goals and weaken our muscles, and think about how good and energetic we will feel after a workout. It is a method, a tool for you to fit to your specific situation. For example, affect improving self-regulation of emotions has been shown to improve anxiety and goal achievement in athletic competitions. So it is something that really works and has science and research supporting it, even when it comes to demanding situations such as athletic competitions. Phew, I think it's time we conclude this segment on the theory of goals, goal setting and strategies and practices to attain our goals. If you need a break, take it now, because this train is not stopping just yet. Here in the Mindset Forge, our goal is to develop and improve ourselves through the improvement of our mindsets. As I have discussed in this episode, this happens through learning, which is change in the brain through neuroplasticity. I have illustrated how to formulate effective goals which you can use to plan and put in effect this change you wish to create upon yourself. I have discussed how mindfulness is, in my view, mandatory for success, and you should have a mindfulness goal to go along with your other goals. And it just happens I found an article linking all these themes, whose first author is Zev Schumann Olivier of Harvard Medical School's Department of Psychiatry. The paper is called Mindfulness and Behavior Change. This article explains the mechanisms of motivation and learning in relation to mindful self-regulation models to explain the complex effects of mindfulness on behavior change. Earlier in this episode, I pointed out the ways mindfulness improves the chances for neuroplasticity to happen. This article looks at the matter from a different perspective, which I would now like to detail, since we have gone through enough background information to start to understand it. Let's dive further into the many ways mindfulness can be an effective tool in your quest to change your ways. The researchers have divided their paper into segments that discuss the various aspects required for behavior change, and I will respect their intelligent choice and do the same. Segment number 1. Self-regulation. As we have touched on before, change in behavior and thereby ourselves requires we are able to control ourselves. There are many areas to self-regulations, namely regulating one's attention, emotions, cognition and behavioral responses. Poor self-regulation has been linked to worse physical and mental health, as well as outcomes in school and academia. To regulate yourself, you need to be able to set standards, generate motivation to meet those standards, self-monitor, and have the willpower to keep all this going. The control of attention and cognitive processes are vital for setting goals and keeping us on the path towards them. On the cognitive side, we have functions like mental set shifting, information updating, and monitoring and inhibition, also called executive functions, in addition to working memory, decision-making, and cognitive flexibility. Attentional control can be seen to act in 3 different ways: volitional, orienting towards what you want, like your breath in case of mindfulness of breath meditation, alerting and sustaining attention to surprising stimuli, and conflict monitoring among thoughts, feelings and responses relevant to the task at hand. These attentional processes contribute to adaptive behavioral change by allowing us to recognize the consequences of our current maladaptive behavior, as well as feelings that might spark avoidance or pursuit, either harmful or beneficial to us. For example, if our goal is to work on a project and we get the urge to check our phone, an unattentive person will just thoughtlessly pull out his Android, while someone with attentional control notices the impulse and can suppress it if it is beneficial for his goals. In functional neuroimaging studies, it has been shown that cognitive control processes engage many different brain networks that are anchored through the frontoparietal network, also called cognitive control network. which includes dorsolateral and medial prefrontal cortex, posterior parietal cortex, anterior insular cortex, and the anterior cingulate cortex. Hippocampus, the memory center, has also been linked with executive functions. Imagining has also shown how the practice of mindfulness meditation increases the volume of the hippocampus. Alterations of the anterior cingulate cortex, as well as functional changes between the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula in context of monitoring for aversive stimuli. Changes in the brain mean changes in our behavior, capacity, and mindset. So mindfulness improves our self-regulation by improving working memory and attentional control and our capacity for inhibiting unwanted feelings and behaviors. Mindfulness provides us with a pause after a stimulus, so instead of blindly reacting, we can use our higher cognitive functions to select the best course of action and overcome negative developments more easily and with less effort. Regulation of emotions we touch upon in the context of cognitive reappraisal, but let us now study how the great practice of mindfulness can empower the already great tool of reappraisal even further. In fact, cognitive reappraisal might be one of the mechanisms in which mindfulness meditation operates. After all, the central theme in mindfulness is unlinking our negative reactions to various stimuli, which by definition is reappraisal. More advanced practitioners of mindfulness move beyond reappraisal into the dimension of non-appraisal, which is in the translated words of the Buddha called equanimity. The brain change making this possible may be modulation of the amygdala, the center of aversion and fear. Mindfulness practices strengthen the links between prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, giving your higher cognitive functions more control over it, which translates to less mindless fear and aversion, so less anxiety. With mindfulness, there is no upper limit to how much you can reappraise the situation and turn all unpleasantness into something good. For example, any setback or negative experience can be thought of as a chance for learning, of honing your emotional stability, keeping a cool head, and so on. When you master this, there will be truly nothing that you can't overcome. With a change in mindset, all negativity will be gone from your life. And thanks to cultivating a growth mindset, you will look upon challenges that face you as friends that help you become better. You will seek out those challenges, and when you once tried to avoid them, thinking them like slaps in the face, you will now search them out just to see how hard of a hit you can take and laugh when you are still on your feet. Sounds amazing, but that's what happens. And I don't mean that you literally go all Tyler Durden with the punching. At least in my experience, which I wish to make your experience also. Mindfulness also affects many functions having to do with how one relates to one's self. The self is a complicated topic, one into which we will go in an episode in the near future, but here's some prelude. One way to see the self is as a combination of different feelings and sensations creating what it feels like to be, well, you. Key player here is interoceptive awareness, which means your awareness of your current physiological state, meaning sensing things in your body. This interoceptive information is processed in the insula, which mindfulness practices alters. After all, the most common mindfulness practices have to do with bodily physical sensations, such as becoming aware of your breath and focusing on different parts of your body, like in the body scan we rushed through before. Lack of interoception means difficulty predicting bodily states. For example, in clinical depression, the insula is disrupted, leading to weakened interoception, so the depressed person might cease to feel their emotions. Another type of self we have is the narrative self, which means our own story of who we are. There is the story of our actual self and the story of the idealized us, who we wish to be. And this discrepancy may lead to self-criticism and self-devaluation. When these self-critical thoughts keep looping through one's head, passively and repeatedly, that's called rumination. Excessive rumination is linked to depression, substance use, self-harm, aggression, and so on. These narrative self-processes are largely the function of the so-called default mode network of the brain. High connectivity in this system has been linked with depression. And wouldn't you have it, it has been shown that this connectivity and activity is lowered in people experienced in meditation, and that negative rumination has also been shown to lessen with mindfulness-based practices. Next up, we have self-agency and self-efficacy, meaning how much influence we judge ourselves to have and how well we believe we will succeed in whatever we set out to do. These aspects are less studied when it comes to mindfulness, but with the strengthening of our higher cognitive functions over other parts of the brain, we gain more control over our beliefs, removing negative rumination and the like, while being able to direct our energy towards the pursuit of our goals, leading to more agency and sense of efficacy as well as resiliency. Finally, we have self-compassion. Might sound a bit soft and saccharine to some of you, but it is important. For example, it has been shown to have a direct effect on self-regulation. Feeling warmth towards yourself is also important for self-improvement purposes. If you don't value yourself, you don't see yourself worthy of improvement. Mindfulness has been shown to have a strong impact on self-compassion. Next, let us peruse what the researchers found out about the relationship between mindfulness and motivation and learning. They bring perspectives other than the one I introduced earlier in this episode, so I thankfully won't be just repeating myself. In self-regulation theories, control of motivation can be driven either by stimulus coming from outside or control directed consciously towards a goal or intention. Unhealthy behaviors are often driven and learned by association with outside and interoceptive stimuli. This leads to habit formation, with the dopaminergic network activating and causing us to seek out or avoid that stimulus again and again. Eventually, even epigenetic mechanisms activate, encoding that behavior even more forcefully, at which point it becomes even harder to unlearn. Extreme example is addiction, where one has learned to crave a substance or behavior they are addicted to and avoid the sensation of withdrawal like a plague. As the process is transmitted by dopamine, the same networks also deal with prediction error, which we discussed earlier, but to recap, means that an unexpected reward produces more dopamine, while a surprising lack of reward causes dopamine to plummet, in the first case causing us to seek out the situation that gave us that rush, in the latter to avoid it. Mindfulness practices bring us awareness of interoceptive processes, freeing us from being their mindless slaves. Instead of seeking out that rush of dopamine, you become aware of this urge that is unhealthy and can then choose to perform better adapted things. In time, this causes extinction of that unwelcome habit or response, such as anxiety or uncontrolled craving. This increased interoceptive awareness, being mindful of your internal state and feeling, is developed by paying attention to your breathing, sensations, posture, stress, and so on. We evolve from stimulus-driven learning, which is essentially how dogs are trained, into control-driven learning, meaning we direct our own fate consciously, no longer a sleepwalker. Your mindfulness practice might start because you wish to become less depressed or sad, or because people tell you to meditate, but the practice will speak for itself and will become something you do for its own sake, motivated solely internally by yourself. And taking control of your mind, life and destiny provides you with a sense of competence, autonomy, which, according to self-determination theory, are two of the three founding pillars of motivation. The third one being relatedness to other people, which mindfulness also improves, as you can only connect with another person if you connect with yourself first. And the sleepwalker is out of touch. Speaking of its powerful effect on learning to change one's behavior and sources of motivation, mindfulness has been shown to be effective in combating substance use disorders, eating disorders, tobacco smoking, tendencies for aggression towards others and oneself, as well as dealing with chronic illnesses. I feel like I could keep going and going. Make Mindset Falls into just one massive episode instead of a series, but I don't know if there's an upper limit to the size of the file I can upload, so I'm going to have to end this episode at some point. But not just yet. I'm not done. Not even close. Maybe take another breather and then we'll finish up with the last few pointers. At this point, I think it might be appropriate and illuminating for me to share something about myself. I pondered whether I should do this or keep this as clinical as I could get. In the end, I figured using myself as an example was proper, since it is because of my own experiences and success in this field of forging a better mindset that have me so excited about the whole concept. Also, I found studies showing that a role model is beneficial for role aspirants, improving their motivation and self-control. So me stepping forward to tell you about my experiences might motivate you, the listeners, further. Also, I do keep this podcast under an alter ego, so you can just put Laurent Lohale into a search engine and link it all directly to my secret identity, which makes this a bit easier even for a private person like myself. So here goes some background on how mindfulness and setting goals has changed my life for the better. I used to have problems with anxiety. In my teens, I had trouble going into clothing stores, since I was afraid I wouldn't know what to do and get laughed at. As a result, I used the same clothes for years. When I entered the workplace, anxiety followed when the situation got too stressful, like when there were too many patients, I would freeze. I was so stressed out, I felt nauseous in the morning. Eventually, I stumbled onto mindfulness by learning about philosophy of the mind through lectures I listened to at the gym while working out. I tried it out and quickly noticed the change. Just breathing in and disentangling myself from the stress made my situation easier. Soon, basically all my work-related anxiety was gone. Now, I seem to be one of the few younger doctors at my department who aren't constantly stressed out. My current position at the hospital is a lot more demanding than the one I used to work, yet I have none of the stress and in fact enjoy my job quite a lot, while many of my colleagues are constantly on the verge of a burnout. And not to mention the patients, many of whom have already burned out. Weekly, if not daily, I notice improvement in my ability to be mindful. It just keeps increasing my happiness and life satisfaction. It is amazing. I didn't have too many goals growing up. Go to school, get a job, and so on, all because that's what you are supposed to do. I lacked intrinsic motivation for everything but playing video games. Eventually, even those became too demanding, so I just surfed the internet. I learned to set goals and work towards them, and now picking up new goals comes rather easy to me. I work out at the gym 4 to 5 times a week. I have written a book which I self-published. I work on this podcast, all in addition to having work from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. and my job also includes night shifts. I feel so motivated I often get up between 4 and 6 in the morning to work on these projects. Lately, to advance my fitness goals, I have also picked up jogging in the morning. It usually takes place between 5 and 7 in the morning, and it is still dark outside and the temperature is below 0 degrees in Celsius. And it isn't even hard. My mind is now trained so it doesn't fight me on these issues, but spurs me ahead. The same can apply to you. I should mention I used to be an extreme night owl when I was younger and could then sleep after midday. Now, thanks to my motivation, good mood and energy, I get up before most everyone and I feel like I get to live a lot more. I can't wait to see what I accomplish next. I now have many different interlinking goals. Take this podcast for example. One goal I have is to really help people develop themselves and live happier lives, free from suffering they so commonly cause themselves in their mindlessness. It is also a way for me to really put my knowledge to good use. Then there is the goal of building a community of like-minded individuals, since I have found those to be difficult to come by. And to be honest, I won't turn down a monetary profit if such a thing presents itself. But that is not all. This episode opened with a quote from the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who has also influenced my thinking a great deal. Part of the reason I have undergone such a tremendous change is the inspiration I have received from his philosophy of the Superman, also translated as the Overman, originally Übermensch. It is my ambition, or a fantasy depending how you look at it, to foster in the time of the Superman, and for that the general mental state of the entire humanity needs to be developed. It is quite a fantasy, but I hope to be the Dr. Erskine to the real-life equivalent of Steve Rogers, commonly known as Captain America. Go ahead, laugh, and know I laugh with you. I hope this has served to illustrate that even when your beginning state is quite humble, even pathetic, you can turn it all around if you put your mind to it. Also, where you have come from should not be a source of shame nor pride. Instead, take pride if you are doing your best to get to a higher place, and shame if you have taken the mindless path. Then use that shame to improve. Now, back to the regularly scheduled program. We have gone through vast concepts and entire fields of research, namely motivation sciences, and taken an in-depth look into mindfulness as it associates with learning and behavior change. But that is just one perspective to look into the matter. More about that in a later episode. The last few points I would like to raise are much more succinct, I promise, and can provide great benefit to anyone looking to improve themselves somehow. These peer-reviewed scientific research papers have demonstrated many ways mindfulness can help in changing one's behavior. But I think the Buddhists have expressed the same concept in a lot more understandable manner, with a parable of tending to a garden. Imagine you are a gardener and wish to cultivate the most beautiful garden possible. So, you want for the beautiful flowers and most succulent fruits to prosper while getting rid of shrubs and weeds. How would you go about this? You would go about carefully inspecting your garden and nourish the welcome seeds while picking out the weeds by the root. The same concept of cultivation applies to your mind. You consider your emotions, behaviors, thoughts, and so on mindfully, and when you notice something that you don't want to see in the future, be it laziness, anxiety, anger, and so on, you uproot it by paying attention to it and recognizing it as just a figment of your psyche, and if that is not enough to suppress it, Use another tool like cognitive reappraisal to put it out. Eventually, it will not rise at all. Similarly, take notice of the things you wish to see more in yourself and water those seeds, meaning that you should make sure the circumstances rise for that quality to express itself, and when it does, pay attention to it, congratulate it and yourself. Eventually, your mind will be as a fragrant, plentiful garden. Let me know which kind of approach you prefer and find more useful. Do you find knowing about the science behind these practices helps you make better use of them and take them more seriously and therefore motivate you to use them? Or are these kind of practical, succinct explanations lifted from tradition beneficial? I'll probably keep doing both, but I would be interested in your thoughts. All this is a lot to take in at once. Especially in the beginning, it can be difficult to stay mindful. After all, your mindfulness muscle has atrophied from the lack of use. Therefore, some outside tools will come in handy. Mindfulness apps have been shown in studies to be effective in increasing mindfulness, at least to a degree, so I recommend you download one into your smartphone. Note that the amount of apps available is massive, and a study showed only 4% to actually provide proper mindfulness training and education, and most were of quite low quality. I am not affiliated with a single one app, so I suggest you do some searching online and pick the one that suits you and your phone. And there are plenty of free options. You might start with one that included teaching and guided meditations, but those can also be easily found on the internet, for example YouTube. On my phone I have the app Mindfulness Bell, which simply chimes at set intervals and signals for me to check where my mind is every time I hear the chime. You might sometimes hear this chime in the background of this recording if I have failed to edit them out. A similar system has been used on the computers of the famous Plum Village Buddhist Center. The background image of my phone and computer are also mindfulness and meditation related. Create reminders that serve you. They might as well be posters on the walls of your apartment. Use reminders that you will really see and don't just walk past them. Pay attention. I promised to provide you with a tool that would help you make the right decision for yourself every time. Quite a promise. It has to do with cognitive reappraisal. The Stoics had a famous saying of memento mori, meaning remember death. Sounds grim, but it was in fact a tool for increasing happiness. Remembering that they and everyone else will die helped them put things into perspective. Is ruining your day over something trivial really worth it when your days are limited? Do you want to sleep in bed all day when you don't live forever? Do you really want to fight with your family members when you remember that one day they will be gone? Memento mori is a way to practice cognitive reappraisal and motivate oneself to do better than blindly follow an external signal driven by dopamine-associated conditioning. With a snappy sentence ready at the back of your head, you don't even have to reappraise very hard. Just remember the intent behind the words and you are good to go. Another such application of cognitive reappraisal is provided to us by Friedrich Nietzsche, whom I've also mentioned as a great inspiration. In his magnum opus, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he tells us of the eternal return. In essence, it was the thought that your life would repeat in the exact same manner forever. Imagine yourself in that situation. Would you waste time and sleep in late, or would you do your best to have fun and excitement? Would you settle to stay in the background or risk yourself to go after your dream? chances are you would make decisions that make yourself proud and that bring you joy. When I apply this tool, I have found myself picking more risky and outrageous courses of action that I might otherwise have done. Next time you have to pick between something new and challenging and something familiar and boring, just think to yourself, what if I was stuck living this day, this choice, this life over and over for all eternity? Both of these concepts will serve you just fine, but I'm going to provide you with a clue of my own devising, one based on the science of the 21st century. One that, if you have understood the message of this episode and have any interest in neuroscience, will speak to you on a personal level. What I want you to do is that the next time you find it difficult to motivate yourself to begin the task you have set yourself, consider these words. Memento cerebrum formare. It is Latin meaning remember, the brain changes. Essentially, remember neuroplasticity. If you don't immediately see how this helps you, let me explain. As we have discussed, your actions rewire your brain. Responding mindlessly to outside stimulus, especially ones that provide you with loads of dopamine, can create unwholesome habits, while using your cognitive functions, showcasing willpower, self-regulation, using mindfulness, physical exercise, and so on, all develop the brain in another direction. So remember, every time you are making a choice or trying to motivate yourself, whatever you do, you will more strongly become. By giving up, you become a person that finds it easier to give up. Giving in to the craving that tells you to do something that is not beneficial to you will potentiate those networks, making it even harder to kick the habit in the future, while choosing the things that are adaptive and good for you does the same and turns you into another, better adapted person. Eventually, those things you find hard will become easy and then natural, habitual. When you consider every action, feeling and thought in this manner, the impulses driving you to weakness and unhappiness will begin to scare and disgust you, and you will grasp at a chance to improve yourself. And there is nothing stopping you from using all three of these pre-packaged reappraisals and figuring out your own ones. I know I have found these tools helpful in showing me the right way. In the end, the only one that can keep you on the right track, the way to your ambition, is yourself. But like-minded individuals can help by providing information, support and the correct headspace. There is also evidence that social networks can help in behavior change. I am also sure anyone interested in this subject will have further questions and comments about the podcast itself, which I would very much like to hear. Socrates himself said he did not like the written word because it cannot be interrogated further. For all these reasons, I hope to hear from you in the YouTube comments as well as the Discord community, a link in the description. I hope that especially the Discord channel will become a place for all those working on their mindset to come together and swap advice, ask questions, share their stories and challenge my claims. Really, that's what I want. Challenge, after all, will allow me to hone my craft and deepen my own thinking. So be sure to check out these communities of like-minded individuals where you can contact me directly. There's end in sight. To recap, in this episode we have discussed neuroplasticity, which means the structural change in the brain that makes it possible for us to learn and change. We discussed the many ways mindfulness helps us change and why adding mindfulness to your life is in itself a worthy goal. We talked about what kind of goals are the most beneficial, as well as how to make plans for achieving those goals. All these tools and methods were provided for you to apply to your own life and situation for the purpose of self-improvement. But when we say self-improvement, what do we mean by the self? That is a question that has confounded philosophers, scientists and common folk for as long as there has been humanity. In the next episode we will delve into this question, because a maladaptive view of the self might just be the thing keeping you down. My aim for the next episode is to provide you with a view that will make changing yourself easier and be of great help if you have issues with self-image or self-worth and the like. It is sure to be a thought-provoking installment in our series. So stay tuned and memento cerebrum formare. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Mindset Forge. I hope you found it informative and the lessons and practices spoken in it relevant to your situation. I also hope you found it as entertaining to listen as I found making it to be. If you found it beneficial, be sure to follow Mindset Forge on Spotify as well as on YouTube, where you can also give us a thumbs up. Also, make sure to check out our Discord server for further discussion, where you can contact me directly. Links in description and channel information. There you can also find the link to my book, which I have self-published on Amazon, called Death Drive. If speculative dystopian near-future sci-fi sounds like a cup of tea, getting the book is a great way to support my work as an author. So have a nice day and memento cerebrum formare.